Hi, and welcome to Girls Lunch, your mealtime companion where we talk about food, gender, sexuality, and where everyone is welcome. I am Julia Andreas.
I am Nicole Hilton. Julia, you like video games?
I do like video games. I like them a lot.
You like video game?
I play them quite often.
When I am looking to start playing a new video game, my number one question that I always ask, or if Ryan or anyone else is like, oh, I just started this new game, it's so cool, my immediate question I have to ask, can you fish?
Oh yeah, very important.
Is there a fishing game? Otherwise, I am not interested.
That's
Don't
exactly like my brother. Tristan, he loves a game with a fishing mechanic. I do not. I think I was traumatized by Stardew Valley.
Yeah.
I rage quitted that game because of the fishing mechanic. But no, I am not of the club of fishing mechanics, but I respect those who are.
Yeah, so that's my top requirement for any video game. Below that, I am also interested in, can you cook? Mm-hmm. What are your outfit options?
Oh, yes.
Can I date cute girls?
Very important.
These are all things that are very important to me. I don't care about larger power structures, the fantasy world building. No, I just want to know if I can date cute girls and wear silly outfits.
For me, I think a lot of as I sum it up to David, I just want to be a little guy. Yes. And I just want to go on an adventure.
It's so true.
No skill trees. Do not give me a skill tree. I want no thought. Just a little guy with a sword.
I love that. Just want to be a little guy. So today, as I mentioned, one of the things that is important to me when playing a video game is, can you cook? And so I thought that it would be fun to have an episode where we talked about cooking games, or the idea of like food in video games, because it is quite prevalent, as you may know.
All I can think about is Cooking Mama.
Oh, buddy. Oh, boy. We will get to Cooking Mama.
Yay!
She will not be in this episode, so this is going to be a two-parter. We're going to discuss Cooking Mama in part 2.
Woo!
We're going to roughly chronologically trace not like exactly the history of cooking games, but we're going to talk about a bunch of cooking games in roughly chronological order, if that makes sense. There is so much that has been written on video game history that is like, much like food studies, it's its own discipline, it's its own thing that you could spend hours and hours like reading about. If you are interested in video game history, I would recommend that folks at home check out the Netflix docuseries called High Score. That gives you kind of a good primer of a lot of the like major games and major kind of movements and eras and things. And then I would also recommend, if you like this episode or part 2, I would also recommend the book Delicious Pixels by this Polish scholar whose name is Agata Waszkiewicz. And if I am pronouncing that incorrectly, I'm very sorry. I'm not Polish. I don't speak Polish. But they had some great insights in Delicious Pixels, and we will be referring to their book quite often. So let's set some ground rules for what we are going to be discussing today. There's lots of games that involve food to some degree, right? It can be an important power-up. It can be like something to restore your health. As we said, you can have cooking mini games or things like that. Julia, I'm going to have you read this quote from Agata about the role that food can play in video games.
All right. I apologize to the listeners if my voice quality is subpar. I currently have a cold.
She is down with the sickness. Ooh,
I am down with the sickness, and when you are pregnant, you can't take anything for it, so I am here to suffer and learn. All right. There is a lot that can be said about food in video games, because there are just so many various titles that play with food, and all the meanings that it brings into human interactions. But as I found myself drawn into two main topics or questions, they remain the main focus of the book. On one hand, I discuss the ways in which food is utilized to emphasize the positive qualities of the game world, such as its safety, softness, and accessibility in cozy games. On the other, I draw the reader's attention to the ways food can become a crucial part of one's identity, and how game developers can use food, from foodstuffs to emotionally charged and socially or culturally significant dishes, to create a bond between the player and the character. Regardless of whether food is there to be found, cooked, consumed, or picked up and thrown at an enemy, food is rarely just food, and it is always entangled within the various axes of power and meaning.
That last sentence, I feel like Agata's really speaking our language.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Food is rarely just food. You could slap that on a bumper sticker for our podcast, you know?
That's true. That would be a good Girls Lunch podcast sticker.
Okay, so like I said, lots of games rely on food as a game mechanic. In this episode and the next one, we're going to be sticking to games that have a focus on cooking, or at the very least have a really heavy emphasis on food. Food is integral to the gameplay or the theming in some kind of major way. I would say cooking games, as we tend to think of them now, don't emerge until a little bit later. So this episode, part 1, is going to be focused more on like food type video games, but we'll get there. It's all still the same soup, if you will. Like I said, I really enjoy cooking in video games. I also enjoy if there's like a crafting element. So, you know, if you have to like gather or farm all of the ingredients and then you like put them all together rather than just like, oh, I need health, I'm going to eat this berry. That's not as fun for me. I'm more interested in like, to make this omelet, I must gather the eggs from the chickens and also get milk. And then I mix them together and then I get to eat it. After these episodes, almost certainly you will have some games you're like, man, I got to check that out. Or like, that sounds like fun. That's my goal, is for everybody to come away and be like, I want to play that. That sounds fun. Let's just start with the origin of video games. Maybe we have some folks out there who are not super into video games. That's totally fine. Some staging, some background here. So before we had tiny computers in our pockets in the form of smartphones, computers used to be huge, right? They used to be the size of a room, and they were so expensive that mostly only the military or like large businesses kind of had access to them, or they were practical for those industries. Eventually, computers get smaller, cheaper, more accessible. Once that starts to happen, we start thinking about, like, what if we could play games on them instead of just, like, war or radio? So in the 1970s, 1980s is sort of where we're going to start. Before we had home consoles, so, like, actual video game consoles in your house, we had arcade games, which is where you had to, for the young people listening, you had to leave your house and go to a place like an arcade or a bar to be able to play games. And I want everyone to take a moment to be grateful to our forebears that you can play Fortnite or Animal Crossing or whatever at home in your underpants.
So grateful.
We don't have to do the, like, we used to have to walk uphill both ways in the snow to school. But
Play some Pac-Man.
to play Pac-Man. And speaking of which, let's talk about Pac-Man.
Oh, okay.
Pac-Man is an arcade cabinet that came out in 1980. I was going to say, like, I don't know, Pac-Man's really like a food game, until I learned two things. Number one, Pac-Man was designed after someone had a whole pizza and they took a slice out of the pizza and they were like, what if that was a little guy in our video game? That's Pac-Man.
Huh.
I will elaborate. And two, women loved Pac-Man.
What?
Yes. Okay, so we all know Pac-Man.
Yeah.
You know him?
Yeah.
The little waka waka waka
Yeah.
guy. Moves through a maze, trying to eat all the dots and the cherries and not get eaten by the ghosts. So to elaborate on your confusion, Julia, about women like Pac-Man.
Yeah. Explain to me.
Yes. Pac-Man was created with the intention of, like, what's a game that we think that women would like? Because up to this point, games are mostly like blowing stuff up, shooting stuff. There's some sports games, perhaps more masculine coded games. Mm-hmm. I would like you to read this little quote from Wikipedia in green about Iwatani, who came up with Pac-Man.
Okay. Iwatani began thinking of things that women like to do in their time. He decided to center his game around eating. Nice. Basing this on women liking to eat desserts and other sweets.
You know what women like? They like treats.
I mean, not wrong, but I also love how this, like, we talked about it in the restaurant episode, where, like, this cultural idea of, like, food for women equals sweet treat. Like, feminine food is sweets. It's just so prevalent among, like, multiple cultures throughout multiple times.
It'll come up a couple more times probably in other video games that we're going to talk about. But I just think it's so funny that these video game developers were like, what
do women like?
What do women like?
They like dessert.
Yeah, exactly. So
I'm like, they're not wrong. I do like dessert.
It's true. Iwatani and other game developers were out to lunch, and they were, like I said, trying to come up with a girl game, and they had gotten pizza. And so somebody, like, took a slice out of the pizza, and Iwatani was like, what if that was our guy? Because that's kind of what Pac-Man looks like, right? It's like a circle with, like, a triangle mouth. Also, in the Netflix documentary that I watched, High Score, they interview Iwatani, who's the creator of Pac-Man, and he describes the little dots that Pac-Man eats as cookies. So I'm like, well, I mean, that's sort of the whole goal of Pac-Man, right? Is to eat everything.
Yeah, eat all the cookies.
It's not a cooking game, but I didn't really think about, like, oh, food is really prevalent in Pac-Man.
Are the ghosts, like, melting popsicles?
I think they are questions. Just ghosts.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're not food related?
No, but that is a good point. I mean, obviously Pac-Man was very popular. In the 1980s, there was a Pac-Man craze, which was driven largely by women who think that he's cute.
Okay.
Which is nice. There was a Pac-Man TV show, Pac-Man cereal, lots of merch and branding opportunities, and there was even a song called Pac-Man Fever.
I'll have to pull that up later.
It's pretty fun. Thanks, women, for making Pac-Man popular, I guess. Let's talk about another arcade cabinet that you likely have heard of, which is called Tapper. Do you know Tapper?
I don't know if I do, actually.
You probably would if you saw a picture or something. You might recognize it. Certainly you'll recognize, like, the concept. So Tapper is actually in Wreck-It Ralph as well. He's like the guy that serves the root beer at the bar. So Tapper was released in 1983, 1984 by Bally Midway. First began as an arcade cabinet, but then was ported to home consoles like the Atari 2600, the Apple II, the IBM PC, and others. Is it looking familiar yet?
No.
Oh, okay.
I have never seen this game.
Okay, so you may not recognize the game. You are probably familiar with this kind of concept. So in Tapper, you play as a bartender, and you're serving beer to thirsty patrons. So if you've ever seen, it's got, I think it's like 4 rows of, like, different bars with a keg at each end. And so your goal is to, like, you fill glasses and you, like, slide them down the bar to patrons. They drink and then they pay and they leave. You have to get the patrons their drinks before they advance all the way down the length of the bar to where you are. Otherwise, they slide you across the bar, I guess, just for being too slow, and you lose a life. You also have to make sure you catch the glass. So they, like, drink it and they slide it back, and you have to catch that before it crashes to the ground. And this is, like, a very early mechanic that we will see in many cooking games later, or restaurant management games. The idea of, like, you have customers coming that you have to serve before time runs out. There's 4 different levels. In level 1, you serve cowboys in the Old West. In level 2, you serve thirsty jocks. Level 3, you serve some punk rockers. And level 4, I guess because it's the 1980s and all video games legally have to involve space or aliens, is just you're serving beer in space.
Okay.
So there's that.
Thirsty jocks.
Yeah. So I said beer, but that technically depends on the version that you are playing. So the game was originally created explicitly with alcohol in mind. It was literally sponsored by Anheuser-Busch with Budweiser logos on the wall of the digital bar. However, not long after release, they also created a non-alcoholic version called Root Beer Tapper, where you serve root beer. so they can put it in arcades without getting in trouble for, like, marketing alcohol to minors, right?
Because that's bad. Don't do that.
If they see a Budweiser logo, then they will be forced to drink the beer. Additionally, if you're playing the home version, your bartender might not be serving root beer. They might be serving Mountain Dew or maybe Pepsi. I don't know why there's so many different versions with different non-alcoholic beverages, but the graphics also look a little bit different from version to version. So, like, you know, if you're playing the arcade version versus if you're playing it for the Atari 2600 versus, like, whatever, you know. Even if the graphics look a little bit different, the basic principle is the same. You have to serve those patrons before they get too impatient. Let's see. Julia, could you please read some of what could have been for Tapper? This is from the Museum of the Game.
All right. According to programmer Scott Morrison, sometime during the development of the game, the programmers thought it would be fun to hear belching in the game to correspond with the belching action of some of the customers as they finished their drinks. The design team got a speech chip from Texas Instruments, and they took turns belching into a microphone to create a chip full of their own belches to be used in the game. However, although this feature was very funny to the programmers, Scott Morrison says that it got obnoxious after a while, and they scrapped the chip, figuring that the rest of the audience would feel the same way. I really want to know if that chip is just hanging around somewhere.
Oh, that's a good point.
You know, like, is there, like, just in some drawer in some, like, old office, is there just a chip filled with a bunch of burps?
That's true. I can only imagine, like, somebody's cleaning out their office after their time at Bally Midway. You know, they're retiring, and they're like, oh, what's this thing in my desk? And they just, like, plug it in, and it's just like, burp, 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 you know?
And they're just, like, taking it back out, like, well, I'm putting this back where I found it.
Yeah. Yeah. Imagine you're a janitor and you find that, you know what I mean? Like,
dude.
Yeah, I feel like that probably would have been, I mean, if you've played Tapper or if you've seen it, like, you get a lot of patrons coming through. I think that would be a lot of burping and would probably get a little annoying.
Yeah, I agree.
Tapper was very successful and pretty iconic. Like I said, Tapper the bartender shows up in Wreck-It Ralph. And many games employ this similar type of structure, you know, where you have to, like, fill drinks and get them to patrons. Even Neopets has a version of Tapper, so, which is, I guess, when you know you've made it, if there's a Neopets clone of your game.
It's a very common minigame mechanic, too. I feel like there's definitely, like, I think in, like, the latest Kirby, like, big Kirby game, there was a Tapper mechanic in, like, so many Mario Party mini games. There was a Tapper mechanic. Like, it's, if you're gonna have a mini game, it's likely gonna have this kind of, like, food service mechanic involved, I think.
Something about impatient customers wanting their stuff.
Stresses you out.
Well, that's the thing, right? Is it creates that, like, stress, time management that gets you, I mean, maybe it traumatizes you or maybe it's, you know, it gets you that excitement that we love about video games, of, like, why we like to play. So, okay, so we've talked about some more, like, food adjacent games up to this point, but let's talk about a real cooking game. Burger Time.
Burger Time?
Do you know Burger Time?
Nope.
Okay.
I don't know. I know no arcade games.
That's okay. You're here to learn. So Burger Time was also an arcade cabinet, also released by Bally Midway, who's the same people that made Tapper. It was released in 1982. In Japan, it's just called Hamburger, so there's that.
Nice.
In the game, you play as Chef Peter Pepper. This is almost certainly a bar trivia question answer. You're welcome. So if you're ever at bar trivia and they're like, what is the name of the chef in the famous game Burger Time? You can be like, y'all, I got this.
Peter
It's
Pepper,
Peter
guys.
Pepper.
And then I'm sitting next to you and I'll chime in with, like, did you know that Peter Piper, who picked a pail of peppers, the poem was based on a real biologist?
It's all coming together.
And then we get kicked out of the bar.
Yeah. And then we are asked to leave. Rather than the bartender is too slow and we throw him across the bar like that happens in Tapper, the bartender picks us up and throws us across the bar. And
no.
we are escorted out. Okay, so in Burger Time, as Peter Pepper, Your goal is not to pick a pack of pickled peppers. Your goal is to build 4 giant burgers by, like, walking across the top of them, and then, like, they kind of fall to the next level, and then eventually you have, like, a whole stacked up burger. You have 3 enemies: Mr. Egg, Mr. Hot Dog, and Mr. Pickle. Now, very importantly, Mr. Pickle does not appear until level 3.
Oh.
You can throw pepper, like the seasoning, at enemies to stun them, and then grab other food items such as ice cream, coffee, and french fries to get bonus points. I will say that I love the idea of burger time, but I'm not very good at it, and it feels more like Pac-Man or Donkey Kong to me than like a cooking game.
Gotcha.
Because it's more like a maze. You know, you're like going up and down ladders, and you're just sort of walking across the ingredients. It's not like you're really interacting with them. Burger Time was very popular. There were many sequels, which include Diner, Burger Time Deluxe, Super Burger Time, Burger Time Delight, Burger Time World Tour, Burger Time Party, and Peter Pepper's Ice Cream Factory. Super Burger Time is a 2-player game which lets you play as Peter Pepper Jr., and I just think that's nice.
I love me a co-op game.
I just like that they're like, who's player 2 gonna be? Oh, Peter Pepper Jr.
His son.
And if I'm not mistaken, he's just a smaller Peter Pepper. Like,
oh,
I
that's
don't think
fantastic.
he's like especially different or any, like, he's just as like, what
Just
if it was
rank.
the same, what if it was the same guy but just smaller? So because of like all of these spin-offs and sequels, they have been ported to many consoles. Like I said, this is a very iconic game. If you yourself at home would like to play Burger Time Deluxe, you can do that on the Nintendo Switch via the Nintendo Classics Library. And there's also, like, as is the case with a lot of classic video games, there's lots of emulators and things like that. Now, maybe this is not surprising, but Burger Time has also gotten involved in some cross-promotional opportunities, although maybe not the ones that you would think, not like with any major fast food restaurants for some reason. But there was a Flintstones Burger Time in Bedrock for the Game Boy Color in 2000.
Ooh.
Which is just Burger Time, but with Flintstones characters. So there's that. But then, and I have been meaning to see if my brother and me did a Munch Squad on this. I don't think they did, but there was the very Munch Squad coded Chili's Big Smasher Burger Time, which was a browser game that came out last year in 2024.
Oh my god.
Julia, will you please read for the people at home some of the press release about Chili's Big Smasher Burger Time?
Move over, Bim Bam. We're having our own Munch Squad. Okay. From the press release. Chili's Grill and Bar is introducing a refreshed version of the cult classic Burger Time arcade game, Chili's Big Smasher Burger Time, giving fans the chance to tackle fast food villains and win free burgers for life! Asterisk. In the restaurant brand's first video game, art imitates life as players are challenged to save humanity from the overpriced fast food burger. Fans play as Joe Chilihead with the goal to build as many big smasher burgers as they can while fending off fast food villains and advancing through 6 levels for mouth-watering prizes. What does the asterisk say? Do you remember?
I think it's just like free burgers for life is defined as certain number of burgers over the, like
over
something
a
like that.
certain number of years or whatever. I love that though, where it's like free burgers for life. Asterisk.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So Chili's did this to promote their 3 for Me deal, which honestly I don't know what it is and I cannot be bothered to look it up because I'm already giving them free advertising. So if you play Chili's Big Smasher Burger Time, if you play the game, if you collect enough bonuses, they would actually give you a coupon for a free meal, and the highest scorer would get free burgers for life, which is, we sure do live in a society.
I kind of love how the whole point of the game is to tackle fast food villains and win free burgers, and yet you can only get your free burger if you do the best, in the sense of like you cannot fight the system that gives you the burger. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like the irony of it all.
Yeah. As of this recording, you can still play the game, so you can log on and play it if you want to. But of course, you have to make a Chili's Rewards account. So
not happening.
Or you could just get an emulator and play Burger Time, like just regular Burger Time. All right, so one more arcade cabinet that we're going to talk about is Food Fight, which was also released in 1983, which I guess was a big year for food video games. In Food Fight, you play as Charlie Chuck, who is a little boy whose main goal is to eat an ice cream cone. It sounds very anticlimactic, but the way it's set up is like the ice cream cone is on the far side of the screen, and you are being chased by 4 different chefs, and they're throwing stuff at you, so it's very distracting, very stressful. There's like some holes that can open up in the floor, and you can just fall through.
Oh, no.
So it's apparently very hard to just eat an ice cream cone in this universe. You get rid of the chefs by throwing food at them, Food Fight, as is the title of the game, and that will like knock them out before they will respawn and try to chase after you. Like I said, this was originally an arcade cabinet, but then it was also released for the Atari 7800 in 1986, also released as a cartridge for the Atari XEGS, which was an Atari 8-bit computer, meant as a home console to compete with Sega and Nintendo. Food Fight has also been re-released for Xbox 360 and Windows. There's also a reimagined version that was released in 2021 for the Atari VCS, which is apparently a modern Atari system I have never heard of. Have you heard of the...
I think I have, just in passing, listening to a couple of video game podcasts, but
okay.
I am not familiar with it.
Yeah, I wasn't either. The 2021 version is called Food Fight Culinary Combat and is like a third-person shooter where you play as a 3D Charlie Chuck. I assume like it's not shooting with guns. I assume it's probably ice cream or mashed potato gun or something. Hot dogs, who knows? So we've now reached the kind of, well, we've already been in the 1980s, but the 1980s, 1990s, we now get to home consoles. So you can now play video games in the comfort of your own home, in your underpants or in your pajamas or whatever.
Woo!
So in this period, we have lots of different companies that are competing to try to get you to buy their system. Sega versus Nintendo, Atari, everybody's got their own little box that they want you to buy. Also, in 1983, again, I don't know what was in the water in 1983, but just food games after food games. We had Pressure Cooker for the Atari 2600, which was designed by, I am not making this up, a man named Gary Kitchen.
Wow, this was his...
It was his calling.
It was his calling, yeah. This is what he was meant to do.
In Pressure Cooker, you play as Short Order Sam, who is a short order cook who has to assemble hamburgers as orders come up on the screen and then drop them off in the correct bin, which that probably sounds pretty familiar to you if you've ever played a cooking game. That's going to come up later. For an added level of pressure, the ingredients come flying at you, and you have to catch the ones that you need. And then the ones that you don't, you have to, like, bounce them back off of your tummy, which is interesting. They just go, like, boing, and they go flying back at the bin.
I love that.
Buns are also just constantly moving on conveyor belts. Something I think is really interesting as I was doing research for this, and just, like, with my knowledge of cooking games, I was thinking about how, like, these make and deliver orders types of games are so often hamburgers.
Yes, that's true.
Which, like, I don't know what it is about the hamburger.
The Kirby minigame I'm thinking of is also hamburgers. I think it's because it's like an assembly line, you know? Like you're not necessarily cooking something, but you are arranging it. Like there is like an order of things. You've got bun, patty, lettuce, tomato, bun, or whatever it is.
I mean, I think as we talked about in the hamburgers episode, like you said, very assembly line, like it's not an especially complex process.
Yeah.
It's not like you're making a creme brulee or something, you know? There's no like complex steps. You are, as you said, just sort of assembling. Stacking, yeah. So Gary Kitchen came up with the idea when he was sitting in a Burger King in New Jersey. He said, quote, "I saw patties traveling on a conveyor belt over flames, and that was it. Went back to the office and started writing it." So Gary Kitchen also worked on the Donkey Kong port for the Atari 2600. He seems like a pretty important guy in the video game world. I'm sure there's people out here who are listening like, yeah, Gary Kitchen, obviously. I'm like, I've never heard of this guy before, you know?
Yeah.
I don't think Pressure Cooker had quite the level of success as some of the other games we've talked about so far, but I thought, you know, it definitely is like a cooking type game. So I figured it should be on the list. 1989, we have Short Order for the NES, or Nintendo Entertainment System, which requires the use of the power pad. Do you know what the power pad is, Julia?
I think it was like a DDR dance pad, right? Like you step on it.
Yeah, so it's a very short-lived kind of controller that is, like you said, a plastic mat that you lay out on your floor.
Yeah.
That has like certain buttons or like circles that you step on. That's like to press certain buttons. And the idea is to like get players to exercise more. I guess, you know, maybe at this point we had some of the like, you know, we need to get everybody fit, stop laying around and playing video games and watching TV and stuff. Like I said, this game, Short Order, required you to use the power pad. So the concept is that you are working at, would you like to guess, a burger restaurant.
Wow.
Of course. And there's a critter that comes in and asks for a burger. Sometimes the critter is a mouse. Sometimes it's a turtle. Sometimes it's a duck. Sometimes it's a pig. Depends on the level. So the critter comes in and says, hello, I would like burger. And then they will quickly show you what they want on their burger. So I think there's like 4 ingredients. It's like burger, cheese, patty, tomato, or something like that. And it's in order, right? So it'll be like, I want burger, cheeseburger, lettuce, burger, or whatever. And you have to remember that, and then you have to jump around on the power pad to like mimic that order and get it in the correct like sequence. So it's very much like a memory game or like a Simon Says. But it's a cute concept. So there's a couple of different levels. There is a 10-story burger, which is kind of like the easy level, which is 10 ingredients, 20 stories, 30 stories, 40 stories, and the 99 challenge, which is, again, you have to remember that number of things in order.
Wow.
The 99 challenge is the pig comes in and says, I would like, and then says 99 things that you then have to jump around on your power pad and get in that exact order, which seems impossible to me. I'm just like, how... That's memorizing digits of pi. Like, what are you talking about?
I wonder if the order is the same every time. You know what I mean? Where it's like, I can see how hard that would be if it was 99 different. Like, every time you got to that level, it was like 99 different things. But I can see it being doable if it was the same sequence. And so you just kind of like do it over and over and over again. Some people will do that.
That's true. I mean, like you could, as with anything else you're trying to memorize, if you did it in chunks, you remember, oh, okay, the first 5 are burger, cheeseburger, whatever.
It's like learning a dance routine. You're kind of like left foot, right foot, up, down.
Yep, exactly. So I don't think that Short Order was like an especially popular game, but I wanted to include it because I think it's just a cool idea to add. Like, it's a cool concept, and I think it's neat that, you know, you had to like move around to do this. So I don't know, it was different and it caught my eye, so I was like, let's include it. That's the last video game I wanted to talk about in the sort of first half here. So before we get wiggy, should we have a little intermission?
Yes, let's go.
All right, let's go get that food fact of the day.
Whee! Okay, food fact of the day.
All right, I'm ready to learn.
Now you're ready to learn. Nicole, today we are tackling one of the biggest mysteries of our modern times. Why chicken nugget shaped like dinosaur?
This is something that I would like to know.
It was apparently like a harder question than I expected to answer, and yet the answer is not surprising at all.
Okay.
Because I've been thinking about this for a long time. I'm like, why chicken nugget shaped like dinosaur? Like, you think about it, and you're like, that's such an arbitrary thing to shape a chicken nugget. Why we do that? And so, of course, I go like online, and I go to Google, and there's just like nothing.
Huh.
Yeah, and I was shocked. I was like, why is there nothing on this? But did some digging, and, you know, I found, of course, many different claims to the Dino Nugget origin story, from, like, the New York Museum of Natural History claiming to be the origin of the Dino Nugget, to Jurassic Park, to a chicken-producing family in Canada, all kind of, like, claiming the Dino Nugget as their creation, as, you know, happens in history.
Yeah. Wouldn't you want your hand to be on that dino-shaped ball, you know?
Oh, yeah. But if you look at the facts and the patents, the real story of how we got dino chicken nuggets is, like, pretty clear. But let's set the scene. It is 1993, and Jurassic Park just hit theaters to, as you would say in your Borat voice, great success. But 2 years before that, in 1991, Purdue, also known as Big Chicken,
right,
had filed for a patent for a T-Rex-shaped chicken nugget.
Okay.
So before Jurassic Park even hit theaters, we had dino nuggets, or a type of dino nugget.
Did Purdue, like, think that, oh, Jurassic Park is going to be a huge success, and they got in ahead of the game? Okay.
Like, why was Purdue ahead of the trend, like you just asked? Well, it was the 90s. Novelty foods were very much in because we love targeting children for marketing.
Yeah.
And McDonald's had, at this time, like, McNuggets are not, like, a 90s product. They're a little earlier than that. But in the 90s, they had a whole line of character toys called the McNugget Buddies that were used in commercials and as a part of, like, Happy Meals, and were like very much a marketing tactic for kids. In, like, 90s American culture, McNuggets were pretty big. Like, chicken nuggets in general were pretty, like, everywhere. It was, you know, common. And Purdue, like, you know, saw the popularity of the McNugget and decided that, like, oh, you know what another great way to target children is? Let's create novelty-shaped chicken nuggets.
That's pretty smart.
So they made, like, star shapes, drumstick shapes, and football shapes. And they were like, I don't know, fuck it, a dinosaur.
I love also the idea of a drumstick. Like, you mean like a chicken leg,
Yeah,
right?
like a chicken leg, yeah.
The idea of, like, what if we took chicken and shaped it to look like chicken, but not, like, I don't know.
To, like, take the chicken out of the chicken, but then put the chicken back in the chicken.
Exactly, yeah.
So, you know, they were just kind of, like, throwing novelty shapes at the wall, like spaghetti, seeing what stuck. And the reason dino nuggets are so ubiquitous now is because of Jurassic Park.
I see.
Like, that is why we have dino nuggets instead of football nuggets as, like, our main nugget shape. So, although Jurassic Park is not the reason for dino nugget invention, it is the reason for their popularity.
And they're also, like, a very distinct shape, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I've seen other, like you said, like, novelty nugget shapes, and sometimes it's like, I don't, like, really know what I'm looking at here, or, like, what do you mean that's supposed to be a football? Like, it just kind of looks like a blob.
The Wall Street Journal actually had a article about how hard it is to make, like, novelty shaped chicken nuggets. Because you have to, like, make the nugget itself really thin and small, because when you add the breading and the frying, it adds, like, more chunk to a shape, right?
Kind of like puffier.
Yeah, it's puffier. And so you have to, like, find the balance between having, like, you know, like a little T-Rex or, like, a little Stegosaurus, like, having the neck thin enough that it looks like a neck versus, like, having the neck too thin that it breaks.
Right.
You know, or, like, it doesn't stay together. So it's, like, apparently a very complicated science to have, like, shaped nuggets.
I mean, it does remind me of, like, if anybody has ever made sugar cookies or seen, like, you know, these elaborately, like, shaped or, like, fun cookie cutters that, you know, makes it look like, oh, it's going to be this really intricate, like, mermaid or whatever. But then, like, when it comes out of the oven, it's just, like, all puffed
blob
out. And it's like, this is nothing. This looks like nothing, you know?
Exactly. Additionally, like, you know, adding to the popularity of dinosaur nuggets, in 1993, same year that Jurassic Park came out, the New York Museum of Natural History remodeled their cafeteria for their new Jurassic Park exhibit. The cafeteria was renamed to the Dinosaurus.
Pretty
like
good.
A diner. And this new museum cafeteria had, like, dino everything. It had gummies and fries, like dino-shaped fries, and dinosaur novelty cups, and, of course, dino chicken nuggets.
Right.
Apparently, it was all very bad.
Oh.
Here, let me see if I can find the quote from one of the kids they interviewed. It was so funny. Okay, this is from the Daily News article from June 9th, 1993. Alas, the children themselves seem considerably less enthused about the slightly spicy dinosaur-shaped fries. They tasted kind of like a mixture between hash browns and hush puppies, said Mark Barrow, a young man in grammar school. His brother, Alex, cut to the chase. They're bad.
Love that.
This is a little bit of a tangent, but reading this little newspaper article from the Daily News at the time, it kind of became apparent to me that, like, Nicole, if I was like, name 3 dinosaurs, you could name 3 dinosaurs, you'd be like pterodactyl, stegosaurus, T-Rex, whatever, right?
Right.
And you'd be able to like look at the dinosaurs and know which ones they are. Pre-90s Jurassic Park, that was not a thing. People did not know the basic names of just some basic dinosaurs. And like reading the article, like a parent was like, she picked up like a dinosaur nugget out of like the basket and she's like, this is a stegosaurus. And then she was like, when you have kids, you learn this stuff. It blew my mind that before the 90s, people just didn't know dinosaurs or like dinosaur names.
This is making me think of like 2 different things. Number one, I think about how like, you know, when you're a kid, a lot of us have like a dinosaur phase, right? Where you're like, dinosaurs are sick, and you get all the cool books from the library and you learn like all the different types. And so I'm like, were kids prior to the 90s, like, did they just not have that?
David said the same thing, and he was like, it was probably trains. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, it was probably trains.
Oh, yeah, that's so true. So there's that, but then also like, this is, I guess, more of a commentary on art and geometry, like as a larger concept, but like how you look at that particular shape and you're like, that's a stegosaurus, you know?
Yeah.
Like, what is it in our brain that does the like this equals this?
The like symbolization or characterization of a thing. But yeah, it's apparently a 90s phenomenon, and I didn't think about that because I'm a 90s kid, and I was like, yeah, of course I would know all the names of dinosaurs.
Yeah. Oh, you don't?
You don't? What?
What? Like, it's hard?
Exactly. So, obviously, in 1993, people had dino fever, and nuggets were, like, the perfect niche to fill that, like, dino-shaped void in all of our American stomachs. Like we've talked about, I think, on this podcast multiple times, it is never usually one person inventing something. It is usually, like, something is invented because of the culture at the time.
Right.
And so multiple people can have the same idea at once and maybe not necessarily be related to each other. This is when we get to that Canadian family. In the 80s, there was a family that produced like chicken products called the Friedmans in Canada. And they were experimenting with chicken nuggets, like different types of chicken nuggets. Mm-hmm. Like ones that were spicy, ones that had filled with cheese, things like that. Eventually, they also got the idea to do, like, novelty nuggets. And their first idea was, like, Mickey Mouse. But then they were like, we can't do that. The licensing is crazy.
Yeah.
So they were like, oh, well, like, what other shapes can we do that aren't, like, Mickey Mouse, but are still, like, fun for kids? And so they, too, started selling, like, dino-shaped nuggets. They claim they were the first, but there's no evidence of this. Mm-hmm. And their brand, which is the Canadian Dino Buddies, wasn't founded until 1998.
Ah.
So that's a whole 7 years after Purdue's patent and like after Jurassic Park. Again, history is very flimsy. We'll never really know how independent the Friedmans were from the popularity of other dinosaur nuggets at the time, if they were just like all the trend or if they also came up with it like more or less spontaneously because dinos were big. But, you know, I like to think about how you could have multiple points of origin for one sort of like idea. Today, you know, dino nuggets are a symbol of millennial and 90s nostalgia, I think. And they come in the shape of stickers, earrings, and even giant stuffed pillows, which I kind of have always wanted a giant stuffed.
Me too. I see them at anime conventions and I'm like, oh.
They're so cute. And I'm like, oh, I just want to hold it. They're undeniably iconic, I think, and they are sometimes delicious.
I like the sometimes.
I had hit and miss dino nuggies growing up, for sure.
Yeah, you cannot cloak a bad nugget with a good shape.
Indeed. And it's pretty clear, like, the Dino Nugget is here to stay in our American cultural zeitgeist. But it also paved the way for, like, it's funny how things come back around, right? Like, so we had Purdue being like, oh, we're gonna try a bunch of different novelty nuggets, like stars and footballs and chicken legs.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Dino Nuggets are super popular. We're just gonna stick with that for 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now it's like, ah, novelty nuggets. Dino Nuggets are so popular. Let's try other shapes, like SpongeBob or Grogu, like Baby Yoda or whatever. And so it just kind of like comes back around where they're like, maybe we can try novelty shapes again and see what sticks. Maybe there'll be a new dino shape.
Anytime I think about Dino Nuggets, I think about that meme that's like, there is a trace of the real self in the false self. That's
yes.
like the circle of, like, you have dinosaurs which evolved into chickens, which are then turned into chicken meat, which are then turned into dinosaur-shaped nuggets, which showing the, like, eventual chain from dinosaur to dinosaur nugget, you know?
Yeah, I think about that a lot.
On the subject of childhood, let's get back to our talk about video games, and let's get wiggy with it.
Let's get wiggy. Let's go.
Ooh. Okay. So, it occurred to me the other day that we don't always explain, like, what the wiggy thing means.
Oh, yeah.
And so it occurred to me, I was like, what if people are just like, they just start with a random episode and they're like, what the fuck do they mean, get wiggy? Like, what are we talking about? So, in the interest of revisiting that, when we say let's get wiggy, we are talking about the program at our former undergraduate institution called Women, Gender, Sexuality Studies, or WIG-Sex, which is where the wig comes from. So we were talking about women, gender, sexuality issues with our topic for the day.
We're not just putting on wigs.
No. Although that could be fun. So if we're thinking about video games, I think perhaps the most obvious place to think about wigginess is the extremely pervasive myth or stereotype at this point in history, honestly, even still today, that girls do not play video games.
Boo.
Boo, indeed. At this point in history, you know, the 1980s, 1990s, like, it is just sort of an accepted fact in quotes, that, like, oh, girls just don't play video games. Like, obviously not. Video games are for sweaty teenage boys. That's it. At this point in history, arcades are a very male-dominated and just generally unpleasant-sounding space. So they're usually, like, dark or pretty dimly lit. They are just filled with, like, shooter games and sports games. They're not always clean. Oftentimes they serve, like, beer and alcohol. Not to say that women can't drink, obviously, but, like, you know, it's a very boys' club environment.
It does not sound like I, as a solo female, walking into that space would be particularly welcome or safe.
No. Like, I'm like, that's not a place I would like to hang out. This is a top-down problem that still exists today, right? So the arcades are sort of a downstream effect of game development, which is also, at this point in history, very male-dominated. Honestly, still is pretty male-dominated even today. We are not going to rehash Gamergate. Do you know what Gamergate is, Julia?
Yes, I am familiar.
For those unaware, it was like a whole thing in, I want to say 2014. You can look into it. But basically the short version is that women are frequently harassed and excluded from the video gaming space. Despite a lot of progress and positive strides, most major game developers and studios are still pretty male-dominated, especially when you're looking at, like, leadership positions, right? And this is true in lots of other industries and areas of business as well. So how do we solve this? One way to solve this, or to try to, like, just generally make gaming more inclusive, which I know is illegal now, using the word inclusive. One way we might do that is to make games specifically for girls. So for girls is pretty fraught, as you would expect, as we've been talking about, as gendered marketing often is, right? How do you target a specific audience without just relying on stereotypes? Or if we want to put it another way, as our friend Agata says in Delicious Pixels, examining games for women unveils industry assumptions about what constitutes normative femininities, right? So looking at or analyzing, like, what games for girls are, or what the industry thinks games for girls are, sort of indicates like, well, this is what we believe to be a normative femininity. What do we think is like normal for girls or women? We don't have time to really get too deep into it. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really have much to do with food. And this is a food podcast. But I would highly recommend that folks look into the history of Purple Moon Games and also Her Interactive. Purple Moon was founded in 1996 with the express intent of making games based on what girls really wanted to play. Not just like what marketers and game developers, aka men, assumed that girls wanted to play. Not just domestic games with like shopping and cooking. Purple Moon actually did a lot of research and talked to a lot of children, especially girls, but children of all genders, to really try to figure out like what do they want, which like really is just good market research, you know?
Yeah.
Let's talk about girly games for a minute, shall we? Julia, I'm curious to hear, how would you define a girly game? And there's no like right or wrong answer. I'm just curious.
I have an anecdote, actually, that I've when you got to this point, I was like, oh, man. So I was like probably 14, 15. I walked into a GameStop because I wanted to get a game for my Wii, I think, at the time. I think it was a Wii. And I was looking for, I believe, a specific Zelda game. I think it was like Zelda Four Swords or something like that. I don't remember exactly. I walked up to like one of the people working at the GameStop. It was some dude, probably college age or younger. And I was like, oh, where are like the Wii games? And he was like, here, these are the games for you. And it was like Cooking Mama, like Dance Dance Revolution, like all of these like girly games, quote unquote, where it was like, obviously like, oh, you are a girl, you get to play these games.
Right.
And I was like, no, I'm looking for the Legend of Zelda games. And he was like, no, those aren't for you.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So like, I have been living with this anger for like 15 years.
Julia has lived it and survived.
I've lived it,
to
man.
tell the tale.
And I went over, like, I found it and I bought it and I slammed it on like the table to like buy it. And I was like, I want this one. I don't want your fucking girly games. Like, get out of my face. Anyway, sorry.
No, that is totally justified rage, I think. The rage of a 14-year-old girl.
Who just wanted to play as a little guy going on an adventure.
Exactly.
Anyway, so to define the girly game that I was directed to play, again, it was Cooking Mama, Dance Dance Revolution, some sort of Wii Barbie game, right? Like shopping or domestic life or like dancing. Things like that, where it's like there is no story, there is no action, there are no stakes.
Yeah.
Besides maybe like time crunch.
Yeah.
But like a game for a girl is easy or frivolous or to do with like a completely incorrect concept of femininity, I think.
I think it's super interesting that a lot of the, like what we think of as girly games, number one, obviously are very like feminine coded activities or like socially acceptable things for women and girls to do, like we said, shopping, cooking, etc. But I think also that they're often casual games, which is like defined as like games that are kind of easy to master, easy to like pick up and put down. It's not, like you said, a story or not very narrative driven. And I think also there's a lot of often like derision towards casual games in gaming communities, you know, like, oh, you filthy cash gamer, like you don't, you know.
It's not skill-based. They're not skill-based games.
Yeah. Like anybody could play Just Dance, you know. You don't have to be especially skilled in any particular way. And you also aren't committing the like, I'm thinking of like some of the bigger open world, you know, like your Red Dead Redemption or like it's where you sit and play for hours, where you like you dedicate your time to it. I mean, you could, and I have played many hours of Just Dance, but it's not, I feel like the intent is less of the like really getting deep into it, you know?
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting that like casual games are frequently like marketed towards or seen as like games for women, and also those are frequently like derided and derailed against.
Yeah. But have you ever played Animal Crossing with someone who takes Animal Crossing seriously? They're terrifying.
Yeah, exactly.
They're the scariest people in the world, man. They'll come to your island, buy all your turnips. They'll leave you destitute. Like, it's...
Yeah.
Or, like, Stardew Valley, man. Like, I can't... It's... Those people who, like, get those games are absolutely so scarier to me than someone who's good at headshotting in Call of Duty.
Yeah. And I also would like to say that, like, I mean, this should be obvious from our podcast. We never judge people on what they like to eat. We also don't judge people for what they like to play.
I'll judge people.
Okay. Well,
if you play Call of Duty, you're old.
Whoa.
I said it.
Wow.
Okay.
I don't know. I want to be sort of careful about this because, like, I think there's been, like, kind of a big resurgence of girly games, or maybe, like, a reconsideration of girly games in the 2020s, you know, where some of us are like, maybe I was too hard on Style Savvy or Cooking Mama or whatever.
I think they're being rebranded in a way, right? Like, you know, it's no longer a girly game, but it's a cozy game.
Yes, definitely.
Like, one just came out, and it's all about, like, building little castles. And David loves it. Tiny Glade, which I think historically would have been considered a very girly game, but now it's just kind of marketed as a gender-neutral cozy game, where it's, like, not necessarily for girls, but it's very cute, and it's very cozy, and there's no stakes. Not to derail your hot takes and good points, but
no,
I think you're right in the sense that, like, there is a reconsideration of girly games, and I think also a rebranding of just calling them cozy games.
Yeah, and Agata talks a lot about, I mean, that's one of their kind of main theses for the book, is talking about how food can make a game feel cozy or make it feel very safe. I saw, you ever, like, see a post and it sort of, like, breaks your brain a little bit? I saw a post the other day that was talking about how, like, in our society at this moment, we're seeing a lot of, like, with the Barbie movie, right? A lot of, like, reclaiming of, like, very feminine things, or, like, actually it's fine to love pink and like shopping and all of those, like, very traditionally feminine things, which, you know, as someone who had a not like other girls phase myself, is, like, cool to see. But it's also worth thinking about, like, why are we having this moment now? And I think it's because at a very larger level, our society is in a lot of ways turning to more conservative values.
Yeah.
I mean, if we want to think of the trad wife, right? Like,
I don't.
I mean, we don't, but, like, I think we just want to think critically about, like, why is it that girly games or girly media are kind of having a resurgence now? Not to say that, like, you shouldn't like girly games or anything like that. If you like to sew, as I do, if you like to wear pink, it's all fine. But just think about larger context.
I think that's definitely a good point in the sense of, like, I feel like this resurgence of, like, femininity as, like, acceptable and popular started from a place of, like, reclaiming, right? Where you're, like, there was this whole couple of years ago, like, bimbo trend on, like, Instagram where it was, like, you can be beautiful and love hyper femininity and still be, like, a smart, capable person, right? Whereas, like, breaking stereotypes and such like that. And I think you make an excellent point where, like, this reclaiming and repopularization of femininity can also be utilized from more malicious sources to kind of push a different agenda towards more, like, conservative values, which, you know, eventually would then devalue femininity again, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, it's so great to be feminine. We love being feminine, but that means that you're not masculine in any way. And, like, you know, re-separating, like, the binaries. It can definitely start off with, like, a good intention and then be co-opted by people with bad intentions.
Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. Back to video games. But I think this ties pretty well with this really cool video essay that I watched on YouTube by this user called Moon Channel, where he talks about, like, why are there no good, quote unquote, girly games. He gives the hot take that girly games, when pared down to their essentials, are just things that everybody likes to do. Julia, have you ever spent time customizing your character or your armor or weapons?
Of course I have.
You have played a dress-up game.
Gasp!
Folks out there, if you like exploring the wide open plains with your noble steed in Red Dead Redemption 2 or Mountain Blade Bannerlord, which I know that at least one member of our audience, aka my husband, plays, because that has like horse mechanics. You're a horse girl. You're a horse girl.
J'accuse.
Yeah. So all he's saying is like these kind of underlying concepts of like riding horses, dress up, raising a family, playing with dolls. Like these are just things that kind of everybody likes to do. As we said, don't you like to be a little guy? Don't you like to customize your outfit that your little guy wears?
Yeah.
That's fine. Anybody can play dress up. Something else that Moon Channel talks about is, you know, he sort of defines like what are girly games and then why are there no good girly games? Why does the industry sort of treat girly games like what's called shovelware or like low quality, you know, they're just putting out games to make money basically. There's no real heart in them. Or as we were talking about with like casual games, why is there such derision of these types of games? We get back to sort of the beginning of like, because video games are such a male-dominated space, the market, at least originally, was not really designed for women and girls, and marketers often just sort of assume that they know what this audience wants. Like you said, the guy at GameStop who was like, oh, here are the games for you, did not really think about you in any complex way of like, do you like puzzle games? Do you like adventure games? Like, you are a girl, so you get these games.
Exactly.
Obviously, as the employee at GameStop did not really conceptualize, women are not a monolith, right? Women and girls don't all like the same things. You know, some of us like adventure games. Some of us like puzzle games. Some of us like cozy games. But at the end of the day, if they aren't in the room when conversations are being had about like game development in general, their perspective is bound to be overlooked. Mm-hmm. In conclusion, I have put an image here from Moon Channel's video, which is the astronaut meme where there's the one astronaut who just says, wait, it's all dress up. And the other astronaut pointing the gun says, always has been. So
so true. I don't know, it makes me think of like Oblivion and like, you know, all those classic old, like Skyrim, all those classic old games where it's like character creation and you spend so much time making your little character. You're just playing dress up.
You're just playing with dolls, buddy. It's fine.
Minecraft, you're just building yourself a little dollhouse.
Yeah. There's one part of the video where he talks about like, oh, you don't like to play The Sims because you feel like it's like playing with dolls? Buddy, EU4, which is, I don't know if you know that game.
Yeah.
Okay. He's like, buddy, EU4 is just dolls and spreadsheets. You know?
Yep.
You're just playing with your little guys. It's fine. I think that's the larger thing is like, it's fine. I'm sure there are folks out there who probably feel that like, oh, no, I don't want to play with dolls. It's like, why though? Why is that a bad thing? Mm-hmm. Think about that reflex. We know why. It's because things that women like are things that should not be taken seriously. But
I think also, and maybe you get to this more in part two, but like when games do include any amount of feminine input or diversity, there's always like some amount of backlash. Like when Samus was revealed to be a woman back in like, God, the 80s, 90s? I don't remember when. That was a whole thing. And like, I mean, there's always discussions about The Last of Us and The Last of Us 2. And having like A, playing as a female lead character in an action game. Or like B, having that female lead character be buff.
yeah.
And then like C, in the TV show, she's not buff enough, apparently. But it's just like, there is always going to be this subset of pushback towards including different perspectives and voices in video games because of like this long, basically 30-year just chokehold that straight cis white men have had on like games as a whole. Where it's just like, you know, we're making games for us, by us, as a man. And then when other people are like, hey, I enjoy a lot of aspects of these games, I want to get in on this, we're like, no, not for you. Go back to your DDR.
You are only allowed Just Dance. You may just dance, nothing else.
Dance.
We have plenty more that we can talk about in part 2.
Part 2.
Part 2. Next time we will be talking about internet games and the next generation of cooking games, which are more actually focused on cooking. We got a little bit away from food in our wiggy section here, but that's fine. It's our podcast, and we are allowed to talk about our opinions.
We can do what we want.
But for now, that is all. Thanks for lunching with us.
We'll
See you next time.
Bye.
Whee!
Our theme music is Red Onions by Louis Zong. Please check out the rest of his album Vegetable Soul in the description. If you have an episode suggestion or want to say hi, you can email us at girlslunchpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.
Delicious Pixels. Nope. I would also recommend
Delicious pictures.
Delicious Pixels.